My daughter's teacher kept failing her for no reason. Then my husband showed up at the parent-teacher conference and she couldn't stop smiling. My daughter Lily came home crying in September. She said her new 4th grade teacher, Mrs. Vance, told her that her handwriting was the worst in the class. She said Mrs. Vance held up her worksheet in front of everyone and asked if a kindergartner wrote it. Lily has always had neat handwriting. Her 3rd grade teacher gave her a certificate for it. I told Lily that maybe Mrs. Vance was having a bad day. I told her to try extra hard tomorrow. The next week, Lily came home crying again. This time, Mrs. Vance told her that her reading presentation was lazy and unprepared. Lily practiced that presentation with me for 3 nights. She knew every word. I emailed Mrs. Vance asking if we could discuss Lily's progress. She replied 2 days later saying that Lily needed to learn to accept constructive criticism and that perhaps her issues stemmed from problems at home. I showed the email to my husband, Ray. He said teachers sometimes had favorites and Lily just needed to keep her head down. I believed him because I wanted to believe it would get better. It did not get better. In October, Mrs. Vance gave Lily a 0 on a group project. The other 3 kids in the group got perfect scores. When I asked why, Mrs. Vance said Lily did not contribute equally. Lily said she did the entire poster board by herself while the other kids talked. In November, Mrs. Vance moved Lily's desk to the back corner away from everyone else. She told the class it was because Lily was a distraction. Lily ate lunch alone for 2 weeks after that because the other kids thought she was in trouble. I requested a meeting with the principal. Mrs. Vance was there too. She sat with her legs crossed and her hands folded like she was posing for a magazine. She spoke in this calm, soft voice that made me feel like I was the crazy one. She said Lily had behavioral issues. She said Lily was argumentative and refused to follow instructions. She said she had concerns about Lily's home environment. The principal nodded along and suggested we consider having Lily evaluated for learning disabilities. I asked for specific examples. Mrs. Vance said she could not discuss details without violating other students' privacy. I asked what other students had to do with my daughter. She smiled and said I was getting defensive. The principal thanked us for coming and said they would monitor the situation. Nothing changed. Lily started saying she was sick every morning so she could stay home. She stopped drawing, which was her favorite thing. She asked me once if she was stupid. I called my husband and told him he needed to come to the next parent-teacher conference with me. He said he had a work trip that week. I told him to cancel it. He did. The conference was on a Thursday evening. Ray got home late, so we arrived 20 minutes after it started. The classroom was full of other parents waiting their turn. Mrs. Vance was at her desk talking to a couple about their son. She looked up when we walked in and her whole face changed. I have never seen anything like it. Her eyes went wide. Her cheeks turned pink. She stopped mid-sentence and just stared at my husband. Ray did not notice at first. He was looking for empty chairs. But I noticed. I noticed the way she touched her hair. I noticed the way she straightened her blouse. I noticed the way she completely forgot the parents sitting right in front of her. The father had to say excuse me 3 times before she snapped back. She rushed through the rest of their meeting in 2 minutes. Then she called us over with this bright, excited voice like we were old friends. Ray, she said. Not Mr. and Mrs. Whitfield, just Ray. She remembered his name from the registration forms. Ray looked confused. He asked if they had met before. Mrs. Vance laughed too loud and said no, but she felt like she knew him because Lily talked about her dad so much. Lily never talked about her dad at school because Mrs. Vance never let her talk at all. Then Mrs. Vance started asking Ray questions. She asked what he did for work. She asked if he played any sports. She asked if he grew up around here. She leaned forward with her chin in her hand and nodded at everything he said like he was telling her the secrets of the universe. Ray answered politely but kept glancing at me. I sat there watching this woman who had been torturing my daughter for 3 months suddenly turn into a giggling teenager because my husband had a nice jaw. I finally interrupted and asked about Lily's grades. Mrs. Vance waved her hand and said Lily was doing fine. I said her last report card had 2 Ds. Mrs. Vance said grades were not everything and that Lily was showing real improvement lately. I asked what the improvement. Mrs. Vance said Lily was more focused now. She said Lily was participating more. She said she actually had been meaning to move Lily back to the front of the class because she was doing so much better. Ray asked why Lily was in the back in the first place. Mrs. Vance paused. Then she said it was just temporary for classroom management purposes, but it was not needed anymore. She smiled at Ray when she said it, not at me, at him. I sat in the car gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. Ray climbed into the passenger seat and pulled the door shut. He looked at me with his eyebrows raised like he was waiting for me to start the engine. I could not move. My hands stayed locked on the wheel and my eyes stared straight ahead at the dark parking lot. Ray touched my shoulder and asked what was wrong. I turned to look at him and the words came out fast and sharp. I told him exactly what I saw in that classroom. Mrs. Vance's whole face changed the second he walked through the door. Her eyes went wide and her cheeks turned pink and she forgot the parents sitting right in front of her. She touched her hair. She straightened her blouse. She called him Ray like they were friends. She asked him personal questions about his job and his hobbies and where he grew up. She leaned forward with her chin in her hand and smiled at everything he said. Then suddenly Lily was doing fine. Suddenly the grades did not matter. Suddenly she was planning to move Lily back to the front of the class. Ray looked confused. He said maybe Mrs. Vance just realized she had been too hard on Lily. Maybe seeing both of us together made her understand she needed to give Lily another chance. I shook my head. I told him that was not what happened. What happened was a grown woman developed a crush on my husband and decided to stop torturing our daughter because she wanted to impress him. Ray stared at me. He opened his mouth and closed it again. He said that seemed like a big jump to make. I asked him if he saw the way she looked at him. He said he noticed she was friendly, but he thought she was just being nice. I laughed, but it came out mean. Nice. She humiliated our daughter in front of the whole class. She gave her zeros on projects. She moved her desk to the back corner and made the other kids think she was in trouble. That was not nice. That was cruel. And she only stopped being cruel when she saw a man she wanted to flirt with. That night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling while Ray slept next to me. I could not stop my brain from replaying every single moment moment of that conference. The way Mrs. Vance touched her hair when Ray walked in. The way she straightened her blouse and sat up straighter in her chair. The way she forgot how to finish her sentence with the other parents. The way she leaned forward with her chin in her hand like Ray was the most interesting person she ever met. She asked what he did for work. She asked if he played sports. She asked if he grew up around here. She nodded at everything he said. She smiled at him and only at him. When I interrupted to ask about Lily's grades, she waved her hand like it did not matter. Lily was doing fine. Lily was showing improvement. She had been meaning to move Lily back to the front. All the concerns I raised for 3 months suddenly disappeared because my husband walked into the room. I felt sick. My daughter spent 3 months crying. She stopped drawing. She asked me if she was stupid. And the whole time it was because a teacher let her personal feelings get in the way of doing her job. Mrs. Vance saw Lily as an obstacle. Or maybe she did not see Lily at all. She just saw a student who did not matter until that student's father showed up and made her pay attention. I rolled over and looked at Ray sleeping. He had no idea. He went through life not knowing that sometimes women acted differently around him. He was a good man and a good father, but he was also tall with dark hair and a nice smile, and some women noticed that. Mrs. Vance noticed it, and my daughter paid the price. The next morning I called the school before Ray left for work. The secretary answered, and I asked to request copies of all of Lily's assignments and tests and progress reports from September until now. The secretary paused. She asked why I needed all of that. I told her I was building a formal complaint and needed documentation of the grade differences and treatment patterns. She said it would take a few days to put everything together. I said I would wait as long as needed. She said she would talk to the principal's office and get back to me. I hung up and Ray stood in the kitchen doorway with his coffee mug. He asked if I was really going to file a complaint. I said yes. He said maybe we should wait and see if things actually got better now. I looked at him and asked how long he thought the improvement would last. A week? A month? Until the next time Mrs. Vance saw him at a school event and remembered why she suddenly decided Lily was worth treating well. He did not have an answer for that. After school, I sat down with Lily at the kitchen table. I asked her to tell me everything that happened in Mrs. Vance's class. Not just the big things I already knew about. Everything. The small stuff too. Lily looked down at her hands. She picked at her thumbnail. I waited. Finally, she started talking. Mrs. Vance always picked her last for group activities. Even when other kids were absent, Lily was still last. When Lily raised her hand, Mrs. Vance looked right past her and called on someone else. During class discussions, Mrs. Vance told Lily her ideas were not helpful. She said maybe Lily should listen more and talk less. But Lily barely talked at all because she learned that talking just made Mrs. Vance annoyed. At lunch, Lily sat alone because after Mrs. Vance moved her desk, the other kids thought she was bad. Nobody wanted to sit with the bad kid. In art class, Mrs. Vance walked past Lily's painting without saying anything, but she stopped at other kids' paintings and said they were creative or showed good effort. Lily asked once if her painting was okay, and Mrs. Vance said it was fine and kept walking. My daughter had been erased. For 3 months, she sat in that classroom being ignored and criticized and pushed aside. She was 9 years old, and a teacher made her feel like she did not matter. Ray came home early because I texted him that we needed to talk seriously. I spread everything out on the dining room table. Lily's report cards, the emails from Mrs. Vance, the notes I took about every incident Lily told me. I showed him the email where Mrs. Vance said Lily's issues probably came from problems at home. I showed him the timeline, September through November, 3 solid months of documented mistreatment, then the parent-teacher conference where he showed up. Suddenly everything changed. Suddenly Lily was fine. I asked him if he could see the pattern now. He sat down and read through everything twice. His face got pale. He said he did not realize it was this bad. I told him it was worse than this because these were just the things I knew about. There were probably dozens of small moments Lily could not even remember or did not think were important enough to mention. Ray pushed the papers away and rubbed his face with both hands. He said he felt sick. I told him this was not his fault. He said he should have listened to me the first time Lily came home crying. He should have taken it seriously instead of saying teachers sometimes had favorites. I sat down next to him and said we were taking it seriously now. We were going to make sure this never happened to another kid. We spent the whole weekend creating a timeline. Ray had a legal pad and I had my laptop. We wrote down every incident with the exact date. We included Lily's emotional response to each one. We attached copies of emails and report cards. We organized everything by category: public humiliation, unfair grading, social isolation, dismissive communication with parents. By Sunday night, we had 12 pages of documentation. Ray put down his pen and said he felt sick knowing his presence somehow made things worse. Mrs. Vance's sudden change was not because she recognized her mistake. It was because she was performing for him. I told him he did not do anything wrong. Mrs. Vance was the adult. She was the professional. She was the one who chose to let personal feelings mess up how she treated a 9-year-old child. Ray said he kept thinking about Lily asking if she was stupid. I said I kept thinking about that too. That was why we were doing this. So Lily would know that when something is wrong, you fight back. You do not just accept it. On Monday morning, I emailed Principal Holcomb. I attached our timeline. I kept my tone professional, but I made it very clear this was a formal complaint about targeted treatment and unprofessional behavior. I said we had documentation of a pattern spanning 3 months. I said we had evidence that the treatment dramatically changed when my husband attended a conference. I said we expected a meeting to discuss next steps. I hit send and felt my stomach flip. Ray left for work and told me to call him as soon as I heard back. The principal's assistant emailed me back within an hour. She scheduled a meeting for Wednesday afternoon. That felt faster than I expected. Maybe they were taking this seriously. Or maybe they just wanted to shut me up quickly. Tuesday afternoon, I was at the grocery store picking up milk and bread when another mom from Lily's class walked up to me, Talia Woods. I knew her from the school pickup, but we never really talked. She looked around like she was checking if anyone was listening. Then she asked quietly if Lily had been having problems with Mrs. Vance. I felt my whole body tense up. I asked why she was asking. Talia said her son mentioned that Mrs. Vance seemed to pick on Lily a lot. He noticed it in class. Other kids kids noticed it too. I felt two things at the same time. I felt glad that someone else saw it. That meant I was not crazy or overreacting. But I also felt horrible because other people's kids watched my daughter get treated badly, and nobody said anything. I told Talia yes. Lily had been having serious problems with Mrs. Vance for months. Talia nodded slowly. She said she thought something was going on. She asked if I was doing anything about it. I told her I filed a formal complaint with the principal and had a meeting Wednesday. Talia looked relieved. She said good. Someone needed to do something about that woman. I met Talia for coffee that same evening after the kids went to bed. We sat in a corner booth at the diner on Main Street. Talia stirred sugar into her coffee and told me her son also had some problems with Mrs. Vance. Nothing as bad as what Lily went through, but enough to notice. Mrs. Vance had favorites in the class. The favorites got praised for everything. The non-favorites got criticized for the same exact behaviors. Talia's son was somewhere in the middle, but he saw how Mrs. Vance treated different kids differently. He came home one day and asked his mom why Mrs. Vance was so mean to Lily. Talia said she thought about calling the school, but she did not have proof. It was just her son's observation. Now she wished she had called anyway. I told her it was not too late. I asked if she would be willing to write a statement about what her son observed in the classroom. Talia said yes immediately. She said she would write it tonight and email it to me tomorrow. I felt something loosen in my chest. I was not alone in this anymore. The Wednesday meeting started at 3 o'clock. Principal Holcomb sat behind her desk with her hands folded. She smiled, but it did not reach her eyes. She said she reviewed my concerns and wanted to discuss them. I pulled out my timeline and put it on her desk. She barely looked at it. She started talking about how Mrs. Vance was an experienced teacher with good reviews from previous years. She said all teachers had different styles. Some were stricter than others. Some students needed time to adjust to different expectations. I interrupted and asked if she read the documentation. She said she skimmed it. 12 pages of detailed incidents, and she skimmed it. I asked her to explain why Lily's treatment got better the exact moment my husband attended a conference. Principal Holcomb shifted in her chair. She said sometimes teachers realize they need to adjust their approach. I asked if she thought it was normal for a teacher's approach to change based on whether an attractive parent was in the room. Her face went tight. She said that was an inappropriate accusation. I said it was an inappropriate situation. My daughter suffered for 3 months because a teacher let personal feelings affect her job. Principal Holcomb said she would look into it further, but I needed to understand that these things took time to investigate properly. I told her I wanted examples of this improvement she claimed to see. Principal Holcomb shifted some papers around on her desk and said she would need to review Lily's recent work more carefully before making any conclusions. I pulled out my phone and showed her the email where Mrs. Vance suggested Lily's problems came from issues at home. The principal read it and her expression changed slightly. She asked me to send her that email along with any other documentation I had. I said I already attached everything to my meeting request, but I would resend it. She wrote something down on a notepad and said she appreciated me bringing this to her attention in such detail. I asked what the next steps were. She said she would observe Mrs. Vance's classroom within the next few days and review all of Lily's graded work from the semester. She said she would also speak with Mrs. Vance about maintaining consistent standards and communication with parents. I asked if that meant Lily would be moved back to the front of the classroom. Principal Holcomb said she could not dictate specific seating arrangements, but she would discuss classroom management strategies with Mrs. Vance. I left her office feeling like maybe someone finally heard me, but also knowing that observation visits never show the real picture because teachers always perform better when administrators watch. Ray picked Lily up from the school that afternoon while I finished some work calls. When I got home, he told me Lily seemed a little less tense than usual. She did not complain about her stomach hurting or ask to stay home tomorrow. Ray said he asked her how school was, and she just shrugged and said it was okay. Not good, but not terrible either. That evening after dinner, I was cleaning up the kitchen when I noticed Lily sitting at the dining table with her colored pencils spread out. She was drawing something small on a piece of paper. I walked over quietly and saw she was sketching a flower, just a simple daisy with petals and a stem. She had not drawn anything in almost 2 months. I did not make a big deal about it because I did not want to scare her away from doing it again. I just asked if she was making something pretty, and she nodded without looking up. Ray saw it too and caught my eye from across the room. He looked relieved. 2 days later, my phone rang while I was making lunch. It was Talia Woods from the coffee shop conversation. She said she had been thinking about our talk and mentioned it to another parent she knew from the school pickup. That parent was Ben Hansen, and his daughter was also in Mrs. Vance's class. Ben's daughter had been coming home upset about school and recently started having trouble sleeping because she was anxious about going to class. Talia said Ben wanted to talk to us about what his daughter had been experiencing because it sounded similar to what Lily went through. I asked if we could all meet somewhere to compare notes. Talia suggested the coffee shop on Main Street Saturday morning around 10. I said that worked and asked if she could text me Ben's number so I could reach out directly. She sent it 5 minutes later. Saturday morning, Ray and I drove to the coffee shop together. Talia was already there with her husband, and Ben Hansen arrived a few minutes after us. Ben looked tired and frustrated. He thanked us for meeting and said he felt like he was going crazy trying to figure out what was happening with his daughter. We all sat down with our drinks, and I started by explaining everything that happened with Lily from September until now. Ben kept nodding and saying his daughter experienced similar things. Mrs. Vance criticized her handwriting in front of the class. She got lower grades than other kids for the same quality of work. She got moved to a different seat away from her friends with no real explanation. Ben said his daughter was a good student who never had problems with teachers before. Talia's husband said their son noticed that Mrs. Vance had clear favorites in the classroom. The favorite kids could talk during work time, and it was fine, but other kids got in trouble for the same thing. The favorite kids got praised for answers that were just okay, but other kids got criticized even when their answers were better. None of our kids were behavior problems or failing students before this year. They just somehow ended up on Mrs. Vance's bad side for reasons that made no sense. We talked for almost 2 hours comparing comparing specific incidents and patterns. Ben pulled out a notebook where he had been writing down things his daughter told him about school. The dates and details matched up with similar things happening to Lily around the same times. I showed them my timeline document, and Talia's husband took photos of it with his phone. We all agreed this was not normal teacher strictness or high standards. This was targeted, unfair treatment of specific students, while other students got preferential treatment for no clear reason. Ray asked what we should do with all this information. Ben said he knew someone who worked in the school district office and could get us information about filing formal complaints. He said if multiple families filed complaints about the same teacher showing the same patterns, it would carry more weight than individual parents complaining. Talia agreed and said she would write up everything her son observed and experienced. We spent the rest of the meeting drafting a summary of our concerns. We wrote down the pattern of inconsistent grading, public humiliation of certain students, arbitrary seating changes, and different standards applied to different kids. Ben said he would contact his district office connection Monday morning and find out the formal complaint process. We exchanged phone numbers and email addresses so we could stay in touch and coordinate our submissions. The following week, Principal Holcomb called me Tuesday afternoon. She said she observed Mrs. Vance's classroom Monday morning for about an hour. She said the teaching seemed fine and students appeared engaged, but she noticed Lily's desk was still in the back corner, separated from the other students. When she asked Mrs. Vance about the seating arrangement after class, the teacher said it was temporary for classroom management purposes. Principal Holcomb said she asked what specific management issues required that arrangement, and Mrs. Vance gave a vague answer about minimizing distractions. The principal said she reviewed some of Lily's recent graded work, and the comments seemed appropriate, but she wanted to compare them to work from other students to check for consistency. She said she would follow up with me again next week after completing that review. I asked Principal Holcomb if she was aware that other families were having similar concerns about Mrs. Vance's classroom. There was silence on the phone for several seconds. Then she asked what I meant by other families. I told her that multiple parents had reached out to me after hearing about our situation, and their children were experiencing the same patterns of treatment in Mrs. Vance's class. Principal Holcomb said she was not aware of other formal complaints, but she would need to look into it. I told her we were planning to file complaints with the district office because the school had not adequately addressed the documented concerns, despite multiple meetings and emails. She asked me to give her more time to investigate before escalating to the district level. I said we had already given it time and nothing changed until my husband showed up at a conference, and suddenly Mrs. Vance claimed everything was fine. Principal Holcomb said she understood my frustration and would prioritize this matter. That evening, I was checking my email before bed and saw a new message from Mrs. Vance. The subject line said meeting request. I opened it and felt my stomach tighten. She wrote that she was concerned about misunderstandings regarding Lily's progress and classroom experience. She said she valued open communication with parents and wanted to schedule another meeting with Ray and me to clear the air and discuss how we could work together to support Lily's success. She specifically wrote both of your schedules permitting and mentioned hoping Ray could attend since he seemed invested in Lily's education. I showed the email to Ray and he immediately said it felt wrong. He said she was trying to manipulate the situation by getting him in the room again. I agreed completely. This was inappropriate given everything that had happened and the formal complaints we were preparing to file. I forwarded Mrs. Vance's email to Principal Holcomb the next morning with a brief message. I wrote that I received this direct communication from Mrs. Vance and felt it was inappropriate given the ongoing complaints and concerns. I stated that all communication should go through the principal's office from this point forward. I also noted that Mrs. Vance specifically requested my husband's presence at a meeting which reinforced our concerns about her unprofessional conduct and the reasons behind her sudden change in treatment of Lily. Principal Holcomb responded 2 hours later saying she acknowledged my boundary request and would speak with Mrs. Vance about appropriate communication channels during an active review process. She thanked me for keeping her informed. 3 days later, I got a call from the district office. The man introduced himself as Jonas Estrada and said he received our formal complaint submission from Ben Hansen. He wanted to schedule an intake meeting with each family to discuss the concerns in detail. We set up a time for the following Tuesday at 2 in the afternoon. Jonas explained that the investigation process typically took several weeks and involved interviewing relevant parties including the teacher, principal, students, and other witnesses. He said they would also review documentation and observe classroom dynamics multiple times at different points during the school day. He asked me to bring all my documentation to the meeting including emails, graded work samples, and my detailed timeline. I felt something release in my chest hearing him take this seriously and explain an actual process with specific steps. Someone outside the school was finally paying attention. Tuesday afternoon, I picked Lily up from the school and she walked to the car with her head down. She got in without saying hello and buckled her seatbelt while staring at her lap. I asked her what happened and she said Mrs. Vance made an announcement during class. She told everyone that some parents were making complaints about her teaching. She said she hoped all the students knew she cared about every single one of them equally. Lily looked at me with red eyes and said, Mrs. Vance stared right at her when she said it. Everyone in class turned to look at Lily too, because they all knew her mom had been complaining. I felt my hands tighten on the steering wheel. A teacher discussing parent complaints with 9-year-old students was completely out of line. Using it to make my daughter feel singled out and embarrassed was even worse. I told Lily none of this was her fault, and that Mrs. Vance was wrong to talk about grown-up business with the class. Lily nodded, but I could tell she felt like everyone thought she was a troublemaker now. As soon as we got home, I went straight to my computer and opened my email. I typed a message to Jonas Estrada explaining what happened in class that day. I wrote that Mrs. Vance announced parent complaints to students in a way that clearly targeted and identified the children whose families filed those complaints. This looked like retaliation, and it was affecting Lily's ability to feel safe in the classroom. I hit send and tried to take deep breaths. breaths. 20 minutes later, Jonas replied saying he would document this as part of the investigation. He asked me to keep detailed records of any similar incidents going forward. He said patterns of retaliation were taken very seriously by the district. Ray came home from work and I showed him the email exchange. He suggested we give Lily a small notebook to keep in her backpack. She could write down anything that made her uncomfortable or seemed unfair. That way, we would have her own record of what was happening in real time instead of relying on memory later. The next morning, my phone rang while I was making breakfast. Talia's name showed on the screen. I answered and heard her crying immediately. She said her son came home yesterday saying Mrs. Vance told him his mother was making things difficult for everyone. He asked Talia if she was causing problems for his teacher. Talia felt sick that her child was being put in the middle of an adult situation. I told her Lily had the same experience with Mrs. Vance's classroom announcement. We talked for 15 minutes about how wrong it was for a teacher to involve students in a complaint process. Before we hung up, Talia said she was calling Ben Hansen next to see if his daughter heard anything similar. An hour later, Ben texted our group saying Mrs. Vance made a comment to his daughter about parents who did not trust teachers. His daughter came home asking if her dad thought Mrs. Vance was a bad teacher. We were all watching a professional educator weaponize children against their own parents. I forwarded all of this to Jonas Estrada in a single email with messages from all three families. I wrote that Mrs. Vance was directly retaliating against students and using them to pressure parents into dropping complaints. He responded within 2 hours saying this evidence strengthened our case significantly. The district scheduled classroom observations for the next 2 weeks. Jonas Estrada said observers would visit at different times without advance notice to Mrs. Vance. The goal was to see her actual teaching behavior instead of a performance. Lily came home after the first observation day saying Mrs. Vance was really nice to everyone. She smiled a lot and asked students gentle questions. She did not criticize anyone or single anyone out. The second observation day brought the same report. Mrs. Vance acted like a completely different teacher when someone was watching. I felt frustrated because I wanted the observers to see what we dealt with every day. But Jonas Estrada called me that Friday and said the pattern of improved behavior during observations actually helped our complaint. It proved Mrs. Vance was capable of appropriate professional conduct. She simply chose not to maintain it when no one was watching. The fact that she could turn it on and off for observers showed the behavior was intentional, rather than an inability to manage a classroom. 3 weeks into November, I noticed Lily was not sleeping well. She tossed and turned most of the night, and I could hear her moving around in her room. Every morning she complained her stomach hurt. She did not want to eat breakfast and asked if she could stay home. I took her temperature and checked for signs of illness, but found nothing physical. This went on for 5 days straight. I made an appointment with our pediatrician for the following Monday. The doctor examined Lily thoroughly and ran some basic tests. Everything came back normal. She asked Lily questions about school and home while I sat in the corner. Lily's answers were quiet and short. After the exam, the doctor pulled me aside in the hallway. She said she could not find any physical cause for the stomach aches and sleep problems. Based on what Lily said about school, the symptoms appeared to be stress-related. She wrote a note recommending Lily see a counselor to address anxiety connected to her school environment. I took the note and felt my chest get tight. My 9-year-old daughter was so stressed about her teacher that her body was shutting down. That evening, I searched online for child therapists who worked with school anxiety. I read reviews and checked credentials for over an hour. I found someone with excellent ratings who specialized in helping kids process difficult experiences with authority figures. Her first available appointment was in early December, 3 weeks away. I booked it immediately, but knew Lily needed support sooner than that. The next morning, I called the school and asked to speak with the counselor. The secretary transferred me to Celine Potter's office. Celine answered on the second ring. I explained the situation with Mrs. Vance, the district investigation, and Lily's recent physical symptoms from stress. Celine listened without interrupting, and then said she could start seeing Lily twice a week during lunch period. She said the sessions would focus on coping strategies and giving Lily a safe space to talk about her feelings. I thanked her multiple times and felt relieved that someone at the school was finally helping my daughter instead of defending the teacher. Celine called me 4 days later after her second session with Lily. She said she needed to share some concerns about what she was seeing. Lily showed clear signs of anxiety when discussing school and Mrs. Vance specifically. She had internalized a lot of the criticism to the point where she believed she was not smart or capable. Celine said this kind of damage to a child's self-perception could have long-term effects if not addressed. She asked if I wanted her to write a formal statement for the district investigation about Lily's mental health deterioration. I said yes immediately. Having a school counselor document the emotional impact would add important weight to our complaint. Celine said she would send the statement to Jonas Estrada by the end of the week. The investigation entered its 4th week in late November. Jonas Estrada called and asked Ray and me to come to the district office for separate interviews. My appointment was scheduled for Tuesday at 10 in the morning. I sat in a small conference room across from Jonas while he asked detailed questions about everything that happened. He wanted to know about the parent-teacher conference where Mrs. Vance's behavior changed. He asked about the timeline of Lily's mistreatment before and after that meeting. He asked about every email and communication we had with the school. I answered everything as thoroughly as I could and showed him my documented timeline with dates and incidents. The interview lasted 90 minutes. Ray went in after me and was there for about an hour. When we met back in the parking lot, he looked tired. He said Jonas asked him to describe how Mrs. Vance acted toward him at the conference. Ray admitted he felt uncomfortable with the attention she gave him. He said he told Jonas that he initially dismissed my concerns because he did not want to believe a teacher would let personal feelings affect how she treated a student. Principal Holcomb called me the following Monday morning. She said Jonas Estrada had interviewed Mrs. Vance on Friday afternoon. According to Holcomb, Mrs. Vance became very defensive and emotional during the interview. She claimed she was targeted by difficult parents who did not like her high standards. She denied treating any student differently than others. She suggested suggested the parents were overreacting to normal classroom management, and that some families just could not handle constructive feedback. Holcomb's voice sounded strained when she told me this. I asked what happened next, and she said the district was still reviewing all the evidence and witness statements. A decision would come within 2 weeks. Early December finally brought Lily's first appointment with the private therapist. I sat in the waiting room for 50 minutes while they talked. When the door opened, the therapist asked if she could speak with me privately. We went into her office while Lily waited outside with a coloring book. The therapist sat across from me with a serious expression. She said Lily was showing symptoms consistent with being in a psychologically unsafe environment. The anxiety, the physical symptoms, the damaged self-image all pointed to ongoing emotional harm. She asked me directly whether keeping Lily in Mrs. Vance's classroom was worth the mental health cost, even if it meant disrupting her school year. I felt tears start and blinked them back. I told her we were waiting for the district investigation to finish, but that I was ready to pull Lily out immediately if needed. The therapist nodded and said sometimes protecting a child meant making hard choices that looked like giving up the fight. I left that appointment knowing I could not let this go on much longer, no matter what the district decided. That night, Ray and I sat at the kitchen table after Lily went to bed. I told him we needed to pull her out of Mrs. Vance's class immediately. Ray rubbed his face and said he understood, but worried it might look like we were backing down from the complaint. I said I did not care how it looked anymore. Our daughter was having stomach aches every morning and asking if she was stupid. Ray argued that the investigation was almost done, and moving her now might weaken our case. I slammed my hand on the table and asked him what case mattered more than Lily's mental health. He went quiet for a long time. Then he said I was right. We decided to request a meeting with Principal Holcomb to discuss temporary placement while the investigation finished. I emailed the principal that night asking for an urgent meeting about Lily's classroom situation. Principal Holcomb called me back 2 days later. She said she received my email about moving Lily and wanted to discuss it in person. I went to the school that afternoon with the therapist's written recommendation in my bag. The principal sat behind her desk looking tired. She said moving students mid-year was very disruptive to their education. I pulled out the therapist's letter and slid it across the desk. Principal Holcomb read it slowly, her mouth pressed into a thin line. I told her that Lily was showing symptoms of being in a psychologically unsafe environment. I mentioned that the school counselor Celine Potter had similar concerns. The principal looked up at me and said she understood my worry, but needed to consider what message it sent if they moved every child whose parents complained about a teacher. I felt my face get hot. I told her this was not about a complaint. This was about my daughter's documented mental health crisis caused by remaining in that classroom. Principal Holcomb sighed and said she would need to consult with the district before making any decisions about classroom changes. She promised to get back to me within a week. I left that meeting shaking with anger and frustration. Talia called me that evening asking how it went. I told her the principal was stalling. Talia went quiet for a moment. Then she said something interesting had happened. 2 more families approached her with concerns about Mrs. Vance. I sat up straighter and asked her to tell me everything. Talia explained that one mother said her daughter was in Mrs. Vance's class 2 years ago. The girl had similar experiences with unfair grading and public criticism. The mother thought it was just a personality conflict and never reported it. Talia said the other family had a son in Mrs. Vance's class 3 years back who also struggled with anxiety that year. They assumed he was just sensitive. I felt sick realizing this pattern went back years. How many other kids had Mrs. Vance damaged before anyone connected the dots? I called Jonas Estrada the next morning and told him about the families from previous years. He asked me to have Talia send him their contact information. Jonas explained that establishing a multi-year pattern significantly strengthened the case. It proved this was not a one-time situation or personality clash with specific families. He said the investigation timeline would need to extend into January to accommodate interviewing the additional witnesses. I asked if that meant Lily had to stay in Mrs. Vance's class even longer. Jonas said that was up to the school administration, but the district investigation could not force immediate classroom changes. I hung up feeling defeated. The system moved so slowly while my daughter suffered every single day. 3 weeks before winter break, Principal Holcomb finally called. She said the district approved moving Lily to the other 4th grade classroom after the holidays. The teacher was Mr. Roberts. He had been briefed on the situation and was prepared to help Lily transition smoothly. I felt relief wash over me so strong I almost cried. Then anger rushed in right behind it. I asked Principal Holcomb why it took 2 months of fighting and a therapist's recommendation to get my daughter out of a harmful situation. The principal said quietly that these decisions required careful consideration and district approval. I told her that careful consideration meant my 9-year-old spent 2 months being tortured while adults moved paperwork around. Principal Holcomb did not respond to that. She just said Mr. Roberts would reach out before winter break to introduce himself. Winter break arrived and Lily seemed different almost immediately. She slept better. She drew pictures of snowmen and decorated cookies with her friends. The stomach aches stopped. Ray and I sat on the couch one night watching her color at the kitchen table. He said he felt guilty for not pulling her out sooner. I told him I felt the same way. We had believed the system would fix itself faster. We had trusted that adults in charge would prioritize a child's well-being over administrative convenience. Ray said we should have trusted our instincts about our own daughter over institutional pressure. I agreed. We promised each other that if anything like this ever happened again, we would act immediately, instead of waiting for permission from people who did not love our child the way we did. The first week of January came too fast. Lily was nervous about being the new kid mid-year in Mr. Roberts' class. Ray and I walked her to the classroom that first morning. Mr. Roberts stood at the door greeting students. He was younger than Mrs. Vance with an easy smile. He shook Lily's hand and told her he was glad she was joining the class. He introduced her to a girl named Sophie who offered to show Lily where everything was. I watched my daughter walk into that classroom and felt cautiously hopeful. Ray squeezed my hand. We left the school together, and I checked my phone obsessively all day. day, waiting for a call saying Lily was upset or sick. No call came. When I picked her up that afternoon, Lily said Mr. Roberts was nice. Sophie shared her markers during art time. By Wednesday, Lily told me she actually liked going to the school again. I cried in the car after drop-off that morning. Jonas Estrada emailed me in late January asking to schedule a meeting to discuss the investigation findings. He said both Ray and I should attend. We met him at the district office on a Thursday afternoon. Jonas sat across from us with a thick folder of documents. He explained that the district found substantial evidence of unprofessional conduct by Mrs. Vance. The evidence included the documented pattern of targeted negative treatment toward Lily. It included the inappropriate classroom comments Mrs. Vance made about parent complaints. It included her failure to maintain consistent professional standards across all students. Jonas showed us statements from other families describing similar experiences. He showed us the school counselor's report about Lily's deteriorating mental health. Everything we had documented and fought for was right there in black and white. The district's findings also addressed Mrs. Vance's behavior during the parent-teacher conference. Jonas chose his words carefully. He said the district noted concerning boundary issues in how Mrs. Vance interacted with Ray. They documented her documented behavior change when Ray attended the meeting. They found it problematic that her treatment of Lily improved dramatically after that conference. Jonas explained they could not explicitly state that Mrs. Vance developed an inappropriate attraction because that would require proof of intent. But the boundary issues language made it clear they recognized what happened. The district recommended a formal reprimand for Mrs. Vance. She would be required to complete mandatory professional development on classroom management and professional boundaries. An administrator would monitor her classroom for the remainder of the school year. I asked Jonas if that was it. A reprimand and some training classes. Mrs. Vance got to keep teaching after what she did to my daughter, and who knows how many other kids. Jonas said he understood my frustration. He explained that union contracts and district policies limited what consequences could be imposed for first-time offenses. If there were any further complaints or violations, the consequences would escalate significantly. The district was also implementing more frequent administrative observations of her classroom. Other families had the option to request classroom changes. Ray asked what happened to the kids who stayed in her class. Jonas said the increased monitoring should prevent future problems. I did not feel satisfied with that answer, but I understood the system had limits. At least Mrs. Vance would be watched closely now. At least other families knew they could speak up. At least my daughter was safe. Ray turned to Jonas and asked what would happen to the kids who stayed in Mrs. Vance's class. Jonas explained that all families received notification about the option to request classroom changes. 3 families put in transfer requests within the first 2 days. Mrs. Vance would begin second semester with fewer students and an administrator observing her classroom twice a week. The district wanted to make sure no other children experienced what Lily went through. I felt some relief knowing other parents could protect their kids, but I worried about the families who might not request transfers because they didn't want to cause trouble or didn't realize how bad things could get. Late January brought an unexpected encounter at the grocery store. I was comparing prices on cereal boxes when I spotted Mrs. Vance 3 aisles over examining produce. She looked up, made eye contact with me, and immediately turned her cart down a different aisle. I stood there holding a box of Cheerios, feeling this weird combination of victory and disappointment. Victory because she clearly felt uncomfortable facing me after everything that happened. Disappointment because a teacher who should have cared about children let her personal feelings create so much damage. That evening, I told Ray about seeing her. He stared at his dinner plate and said he felt guilty every time he thought about the situation. I reminded him for the 100th time that he didn't do anything wrong, that Mrs. Vance made her own choices, that a professional adult should never let attraction affect how she treats a child. He nodded, but I could tell he still carried the weight of it. Lily flourished in Mr. Roberts' classroom like a plant finally getting sunlight. Her first week there, she came home talking about a science experiment they did with volcanoes. The second week, she volunteered to present her favorite book to the class. She practiced her presentation at home, but this time she looked excited instead of terrified. Her grades jumped from D's to B's within 3 weeks. One evening, I opened my email and found a message from Mr. Roberts saying Lily was bright, engaged, and contributed great ideas during class discussions. He wrote that he was glad to have her in his class. I sat at my computer and cried reading those words. It was the first positive feedback from a teacher since September, the first time in months that someone at that school saw my daughter for who she really was, instead of treating her like a problem. February arrived with Lily's progress report from Mr. Roberts. Strong grades lined every subject. His comments praised her participation, creativity, and willingness to help other students. I showed the report to Ray, and we both felt this huge sense of relief washing over us. The therapist called that same week to discuss Lily's progress. She reported that Lily's anxiety symptoms had decreased significantly now that she felt safe in her classroom. We talked about reducing therapy sessions from weekly to every other week. Lily seemed ready for that change. She still had moments where she worried about school or asked if her teacher liked her, but those moments came less often and passed more quickly. My phone buzzed with a text from Talia. She heard through the parent network that Mrs. Vance planned to transfer to a different school next year. Apparently, the administrative oversight and smaller class size made her uncomfortable. She wanted a fresh start somewhere else. I felt relieved she wouldn't be teaching at our school next year, wouldn't have the chance to target another child the way she targeted Lily. But I also felt worried about whatever school accepted her application. Would she do the same thing to students there? Would another family have to go through what we went through before anyone believed them? I wanted to warn every school in the district, but I knew that wasn't possible or appropriate. The school counselor Celine called to check on how Lily was adjusting. She said she noticed a huge difference in Lily's body language and confidence during their sessions. Lily smiled more, made eye contact, talked about school without that tight, anxious expression she used to have. Celine mentioned she wrote a detailed report to the district about the mental health impact of situations like ours. She recommended they consider consider training for teachers on how educator behavior affects student psychological health. I thanked her for advocating beyond just our individual case. It mattered that someone in the school system understood the real damage Mrs. Vance caused and wanted to prevent it from happening again. Early March brought an unexpected phone call from Principal Holcomb. She apologized for not taking my initial concerns more seriously back in September and October. She said the investigation opened her eyes to how a teacher's personal issues could create a toxic environment for students. The school was implementing new protocols for responding to parent complaints about targeted treatment. Any future complaint would trigger immediate classroom observation and documentation review instead of waiting months for problems to escalate. I appreciated the apology but told her honestly that it shouldn't have taken months and multiple families suffering before someone in authority believed us. She agreed and said that was exactly why they were changing the system. I hung up feeling like maybe something good came from our nightmare. Maybe the next family wouldn't have to fight as hard as we did. Ray and I attended a parent-teacher conference with Mr. Roberts in mid-March. Walking into that classroom felt completely different from walking into Mrs. Vance's conference. Mr. Roberts had actual examples of Lily's work spread across the table. He talked about her academic progress, her social development with classmates, and specific ways we could support her learning at home. He had only positive things to say about her contributions to the class. Sitting there listening to him, I realized how much energy I spent fighting Mrs. Vance's mistreatment instead of supporting my daughter's actual education. All those hours documenting incidents, writing emails, attending meetings, filing complaints. That energy should have gone toward helping Lily learn and grow, but instead I had to use it to protect her from her own teacher. Lily asked one Saturday morning if she could invite friends over for a birthday party. She hadn't wanted to do that since the school year started, hadn't wanted to risk other kids seeing her as the problem student Mrs. Vance made her out to be. We planned a small party with kids from her new class. I bought decorations and cake supplies. Ray set up games in the backyard. The day of the party, I watched Lily laugh and play with her friends, watched her be silly and confident and herself. She looked like the kid she was before September, before Mrs. Vance decided to punish her for something that had nothing to do with her. Watching her blow out her birthday candles surrounded by friends reminded me why we fought so hard. She deserved to be herself. She deserved to feel safe and valued at the school. The therapist met with Ray and me without Lily present. She explained that Lily had processed much of the trauma from Mrs. Vance's classroom and was developing healthy ways to deal with difficult authority figures in the future. Lily understood now that the problem was Mrs. Vance's behavior, not her own worth or abilities. We agreed to move to monthly check-in sessions rather than weekly therapy. I felt grateful Lily was healing, grateful she had the support she needed to recover. But I also knew this experience would probably affect how she viewed teachers and school for a long time. She lost some innocence this year, learned too early that adults in positions of authority don't always act in children's best interests. That knowledge would protect her in some ways, but it also meant she'd never trust teachers quite the same way again. Ben called me 2 days after Lily's birthday party. His daughter transferred to a different classroom last month and her grades went back up immediately. He asked if I wanted to join a group of parents who were meeting with the school board about changing how the district handles teacher misconduct complaints. I said yes without thinking about it. We needed better systems, so other families would not spend months fighting like we did. Ray and I sat on the back porch after Lily went to bed that night. He told me he should have believed me in September when I first raised concerns about Mrs. Vance. He said he kept thinking teachers knew best, and Lily just needed to adjust. I watched him pick at the label on his beer bottle. He looked tired in a way that had nothing to do with work. I told him I understood why he wanted to believe the situation would fix itself. Nobody wants to think a teacher would hurt their kid on purpose, but we both learned that protecting Lily meant fighting even when the school made it hard, even when people acted like we were overreacting, even when it took months to get anyone to listen. Lily came home from the school in mid-March carrying a poster board under her arm. Mr. Roberts assigned a self-portrait project where students had to draw themselves and add words describing who they are. She spread it out on the kitchen table and I saw the drawing first, then the words around the edges. Creative, smart, kind, funny, good friend. 3 months ago, my daughter asked me if she was stupid. I stood there looking at those words and started crying. Ray came in from the garage and asked what was wrong. I showed him the poster. He put his hand on Lily's shoulder and told her it was perfect. She smiled and said Mr. Roberts told her she had a really good imagination. I was relieved she could see herself clearly again. I was also so angry at Mrs. Vance for making Lily doubt herself in the first place. The school district sent a letter to all families in late March. They announced new professional development for teachers about maintaining appropriate boundaries with students and families. The letter talked about responding to diverse student needs and creating inclusive classroom environments. They did not mention our complaint or Mrs. Vance by name, but I knew our fight helped create those policy changes. Talia texted me a photo of the letter with 3 exclamation points. Something good came from the awful experience our families went through. Mr. Roberts pulled me aside during pickup one afternoon in early April. He said he nominated Lily for the school creative writing showcase next month. Only 10 students from the whole school get selected. Lily wrote a story about a girl who learns to speak up when something feels wrong. Mr. Roberts said it was really well written and showed a lot of emotional depth for a 4th grader. I asked if I could read it. He printed me a copy. That night, I sat on the couch reading about a girl named Maya who has a mean teacher. Maya stays quiet at first because she thinks nobody will believe her. Then her best friend encourages her to tell her parents. The parents fight for Maya, and eventually she gets moved to a better classroom where the teacher is kind. I recognized our story transformed into fiction. I was proud that Lily found a healthy way to process what happened to her. Talia and I met for coffee on a Saturday morning while our kids had a play date at the park. We talked about how the complaint process brought our families together. We became actual friends through the shared struggle of fighting the school system. Our kids play together every week now. Talia took a sip of her latte and leaned forward. She heard from another another parent that Mrs. Vance accepted a position at a school in a different district for next year. She was leaving. I felt relieved and worried at the same time. Relieved she would not be teaching at our school anymore. Worried about the kids at whatever school hired her next. Ray surprised Lily with tickets to see her favorite author at a bookstore event downtown. I watched them get ready to leave, Lily chattering about which book she wanted to get signed. Ray knelt down to tie her shoe even though she could do it herself now. He listened to everything she said and asked questions about the characters in the books. Their relationship changed this year. Ray was more present now, more careful about Lily's feelings, more willing to believe her when she said something was wrong. He learned the same lesson I did about trusting your kid over trusting systems that do not always work right. The school year wound down in May with field day and the spring concert. Lily made 3 close friends in Mr. Roberts' class. She recovered all the ground she lost academically during first semester with Mrs. Vance. Her final report card came home with strong grades and comments about her participation and creativity. Mr. Roberts wrote that Lily was a joy to have in class, and he looked forward to seeing what she accomplished in 5th grade. I saved that report card in a folder with all the documentation from the complaint. I wanted to remember both parts of this year, the fight we had to wage and the recovery Lily made once she had a teacher who actually supported her. On the last day of school, Mr. Roberts asked if he could talk to me for a minute. The classroom was empty except for us. He said Lily was a remarkable kid who showed real strength this year. He was glad the situation got resolved and that Lily ended up in his classroom. I thanked him for creating the kind of environment where Lily could heal, where she could remember she was smart and creative and worthy of respect. He smiled and said that was just good teaching. Every kid deserved that. Summer arrived and Lily went back to being herself. She drew constantly, covering our fridge with new artwork every week. She read 3 books a week from the library. She played with friends at the pool without any of the anxiety that marked the fall and winter. The therapist met with us in early June and said we could stop regular sessions. Lily processed the trauma and developed good coping strategies. We would check in if any school anxiety came back in the fall. I sat by the community pool one afternoon watching Lily swim and laugh with her friends. Ray sat next to me reading a book but really watching Lily too. I was grateful we fought for her even when it was exhausting. Even when the school made us feel crazy for complaining. Even when it took months to get anyone to take us seriously. We protected our daughter and she came out okay on the other side. Late August arrived and Lily asked me one morning if she had to go back to the school. I told her yes, but this time would be different. She looked at me with those big worried eyes and said she did not want another teacher like Mrs. Vance. Ray sat down next to her at the kitchen table and promised we would never let that happen again. We scheduled a meeting with her new 5th grade teacher before the school year started. Her name was Ms. Jang, and she had a classroom full of student artwork on the walls. She shook Lily's hand first before talking to us and asked Lily what she liked to learn about. Lily said she liked art and reading. So Ms. Jang smiled and said those were her favorite subjects too. She showed Lily the reading corner with beanbag chairs and the art supplies shelf. Lily walked around the classroom touching things gently like she was afraid they might disappear. Ms. Jang told us her classroom rules focused on respect and creativity. She said every student had something valuable to contribute and her job was helping them find it. Ray asked how she handled students who struggled in certain areas. Ms. Jang said she believed in meeting kids where they were and building from there, not comparing them to others or holding them to impossible standards. I watched Lily's shoulders relax as Ms. Jang talked. She picked up a paintbrush from the art station and looked at me with the first real smile I had seen about school in almost a year. Ray and I talked that night after Lily went to bed about everything we learned from the Mrs. Vance situation. He said he should have believed me from the start instead of telling Lily to keep her head down. I said we both made mistakes by trusting the system to fix itself. We decided if anything similar ever happened again, we would document everything immediately with dates and details. We would reach out to other families right away instead of waiting months to find out we were not alone. We would trust our daughter when she said something was wrong, even if teachers and principals tried to make us feel crazy. Ray said he felt more confident now about standing up to schools and authority figures who did not take parents seriously. I said I learned that being polite and patient does not always work when someone is hurting your child. Sometimes you have to fight and make noise and refuse to back down even when it is exhausting. We promised each other we would never let institutional pressure make us doubt our own judgment about what our daughter needed. September started and Lily brought home her first progress report from Ms. Jang. It had positive comments about her participation and creativity. Lily told me at dinner that she raised her hand 3 times that day, and Ms. Jang called on her every time. She said Ms. Jang put her drawing of a dragon on the classroom wall. Ray asked what else she liked about 5th grade, and Lily said she made a new friend named Jackie who also liked to draw. The second week of school, Lily came home with a flyer about art club meeting every Tuesday after school. She asked if she could join, and I said yes immediately. By the end of September, Lily signed up for auditions for the school play. She practiced her audition piece in the living room and asked me to time her. She got a part as a forest animal in the chorus and came home, so excited she could barely sit still at dinner. Her confidence came back slowly, and then all at once. She laughed more and stopped having stomach aches in the morning. But she also said things sometimes that showed she understood not all teachers were safe. She told me once that Ms. Jang was nice, but she would tell me right away if any teacher ever treated her badly again. I felt proud she learned to speak up, but also sad that she had to learn that lesson at 9 years old. Looking back now, I am glad we fought for Lily even when the school made it hard. She learned her parents would stand up for her no matter what. She learned that speaking up about unfair treatment was important even when adults tried to dismiss her concerns. She learned she deserved respect from teachers and did not have to accept cruelty just because someone had authority over her. Our family got stronger through all of it. Ray became more involved and more willing to trust his instincts about Lily's well-being. I became more confident about challenging systems that protect bad teachers instead of vulnerable kids. Lily recovered and thrived, but she also grew up a little faster than than I wanted her to. She knows now that not all adults are trustworthy, and not all authority figures deserve respect. I wish she could have stayed innocent longer, but I am proud she has the tools to protect herself. We came through this together, and we know now we can handle whatever comes next, because we learned to trust ourselves over institutional pressure to stay quiet and accept things that are wrong.